The day my son moved into my house, he carried my groceries inside, repaired the loose railing on the porch, and told me I would never have to worry about being alone again. "Just until you feel steady," he said. I believed him. 3 months later, I found a folder on the desk in his bedroom. Inside were photographs of my house, an estimated sale price, an application for legal authority over my finances, and a typed statement claiming I could no longer make decisions for myself. My son had not moved in to help me stay in my home. He had moved in to help himself take control of it. I did not confront him that night. I returned every paper to the exact position where I had found it. Then I closed his bedroom door, called my attorney, and began preparing for the morning my son would learn that living in my house did not make him its owner. My name is Patricia Coleman. I was 70 years old when my son, Eric, came to live with me. I had been a widow for almost 4 years. My husband, Thomas, died after a heart attack while trimming the hedge along our back fence. One moment he was arguing with the electric trimmer, and the next he was lying in the grass while I called for an ambulance. After 43 years of marriage, I suddenly had to learn how to live without the sound of another person in the house. At first, silence frightened me. I left the television on in rooms I was not using. I kept the radio playing in the kitchen. Sometimes I put 2 plates on the table before remembering that I needed only one. But time passed. I developed routines. I joined a book club at the library. I attended a water aerobics class twice a week. I hired a young man named Louis to handle the heavier yard work. I learned how to reset the circuit breaker, schedule maintenance, and compare repair estimates. I missed Thomas every day. But I was not helpless. The house itself was one of the few things that made me feel secure. Thomas and I had bought it when Eric was 6, and his younger sister, Melissa, was 3. It was a 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood outside Richmond, Virginia. It had a brick fireplace, a narrow front porch, and an oak tree that Thomas refused to cut down even after its roots cracked part of the walkway. We paid off the mortgage 2 years before he died. The deed was in both our names with survivorship rights, which meant ownership passed fully to me after his death. I knew that because I had reviewed the documents with our attorney, Janet Miller. I also knew the house had increased significantly in value. A similar home down the street had recently sold for more than $500,000. I did not think of that money often. To me, the house was not an investment waiting to be collected. It was the place where my children had grown up. Eric was 45 when he asked to move in. He had been living with a woman named Rachel for nearly 3 years. Their relationship ended badly, and the apartment lease was in her name. He told me he needed somewhere to stay for a few weeks while he found another place. At first, I suggested a hotel. Not because I did not love my son. Because Eric and I had not lived under the same roof since he was 19, and we were both used to making our own decisions. Then he reminded me that I had fallen in the garden 2 months earlier. It had not been a serious fall. My shoe caught on a hose. I bruised my hip and felt sore for several days, but nothing was broken. Eric treated it as evidence of a larger problem. "What if you had hit your head?" he asked. I did not. "What if you could not reach your phone?" I could. "You are here alone, Mom. So are thousands of other people." He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "Maybe this helps both of us. I get a place to stay, and you have someone here at night." It sounded reasonable. Melissa lived in North Carolina with her husband and 2 children. She called often, but she could not visit every week. Eric was nearby. He was my son. And I had to admit that part of me liked the idea of hearing someone else moving through the house again. I agreed to 1 month. Eric moved into his childhood bedroom the following Saturday. For the first few weeks, everything went well. He carried laundry upstairs. He replaced 2 outdoor lights. He drove me to a dental appointment when my car was being serviced. He cooked dinner twice, though both meals involved more dishes than I normally used in a week. At night, I could hear him walking down the hallway or opening the refrigerator. The sounds felt comforting. The house seemed alive again. Eric worked as an independent insurance claims adjuster. His schedule changed constantly. Some days he left early and returned after dark. Other days, he worked from home at the desk in his bedroom. He told me business had slowed, but I did not ask about his income. He was an adult. I assumed he was handling his life. The first change was so small that I barely noticed it. Eric began checking the doors before bed. I had always done that myself. One night, I reached for the back door lock, and he stepped in front of me. I already checked it. I always check it. You do not have to anymore. His tone was light, but something about the sentence bothered me. You do not have to anymore. It sounded like kindness. It also sounded like a decision he had made for me. The next change involved my driving. I planned to attend book club on a rainy Thursday evening. Eric looked out the window and said the roads were dangerous. I have driven in rain before, I told him. It will be dark when you come home. Yes. You should skip it, I laughed. I am 70, not 7, his expression tightened. I am trying to keep you safe. I appreciate that, but I am still going. He stood near the door while I put on my coat. For a moment, I thought he might take my keys. He did not. But when I returned, he was waiting in the living room with the lights off. You should have called, he said. I came home at the time I said I would. You were 10 minutes late. I looked at the clock. I stopped for gas. You could have told me. I reminded him that he was staying in my house temporarily. I was not required to report my movements to him. He apologized. Then he said he had only worried because he loved me. I accepted the apology. Parents are often eager to accept the version of events that hurts least. The month passed. Eric did not mention moving out. When I asked whether he had found an apartment, he said rents were unreasonable and he did not want to rush into a bad decision. I agreed to give him another month. He began paying for groceries occasionally. He offered me $300 for household expenses, but I refused. Save it for your deposit, I said. He hugged me. You always take care of me. At the time, I heard gratitude. Later, I wondered whether he heard permission. By the third month, Eric had started changing the way the house operated. He moved my cleaning supplies because he said the cabinet beneath the sink was unsafe. He replaced my step stool with one he considered more stable. He changed the thermostat settings through an application on his phone. He canceled Lewis's yard service without asking me. When I noticed the grass growing too long, Eric said he would handle it. He did not. I called Lewis and rehired him. Eric became annoyed. You are wasting money. It is my money. You should be conserving. For what? The future. I asked what he thought I was saving for. He did not answer directly. He said medical care was expensive. Assisted living was expensive. Home repairs were expensive. He spoke as though disaster were waiting outside the door with an invoice. I had retirement savings, Social Security, and a modest pension from my years working in a county administrative office. I was careful with money, but I was not struggling. Eric knew that. He had asked about my accounts shortly after Thomas died. At the time, I thought he wanted reassurance. Now he began asking more specific questions. How much was in my savings account? Did I still have Thomas's life insurance money? Was Melissa listed equally in my will? Had I added anyone to the deed? I answered only some of those questions. One afternoon, he found an envelope from my investment company on the kitchen counter. He picked it up. What is this? A quarterly statement. How are the accounts doing? Fine. Can I see it? No. He looked surprised. I am only asking because markets have been unpredictable. My advisor reviews everything with me. You should have a family member involved. I have an advisor. An advisor gets paid whether you lose money or not. And you are qualified to manage investments? He placed the envelope back on the counter. I am trying to make sure nobody takes advantage of you. I looked directly at him. Then you should be pleased that I do not hand financial documents to everyone who asks. He laughed, but the sound was forced. After that, Eric became more careful. He stopped asking direct questions. Instead, he began observing. If I forgot where I placed my phone, he found it before I could. If I repeated a story, he pointed it out. If I could not remember the name of a restaurant, he stared at me for a few seconds too long. One morning, I left a load of laundry in the washing machine overnight. Eric mentioned it 3 times. You never used to forget things like that, he said. Everyone forgets laundry. It can be an early sign. Of what? He shrugged. Memory problems. I told Melissa about the conversation. She became quiet. Has he said anything else? He thinks I should not drive in the rain, climb stairs, spend money on lawn care, or wash clothes without supervision. That does not sound like Eric. It sounds exactly like Eric, just not the version of him I want to believe. Melissa suggested that I ask him to move out. I defended him. I said he was going through a difficult period. I said living together required adjustment. I said he meant well. Even as I spoke, I heard how weak the explanation sounded. A week later, Eric asked me to sign a document. He brought it to the breakfast table, inside a plain folder. What is this? I asked. Just an emergency authorization. For what? If something happens to you, it lets me speak to banks and handle bills. I already have a power of attorney. His face changed. You do? Yes, Janet prepared it after your father died. Who is named? Melissa and Janet are joint agents. Eric sat back. Why Melissa? Because she is organized. I live here. You did not when I signed it. Then you should update it. I closed the folder without reading the document. I will speak with Janet. That is unnecessary. This is a basic form. If it is basic, Janet will have no problem reviewing it. He reached for the folder more quickly than I expected. I will take care of it. I placed my hand on top of it. Leave it. Mom. Leave the document. For several seconds, we both held the folder. Then he released it. That afternoon, he was unusually quiet. I called Janet and described the situation. She asked me to photograph the document and send it to her. It was not a basic emergency form. It was a broad, durable power of attorney giving Eric authority over bank accounts, investments, personal property, contracts, and real estate transactions. If I had signed it, he could not necessarily have done anything he wanted without consequences. But he would have gained far more authority than he had admitted. Janet told me not to sign. She also asked whether I felt safe. The question offended me at first. Eric had never struck me. He had never threatened me physically. Then Janet explained that safety included financial control, coercion, access to documents, and manipulation. I told her I was uncomfortable, but I did not believe I was in immediate danger. She advised me to secure my records and check my credit. I moved my bank statements, deed copies, insurance documents, and estate records into a locking cabinet in my bedroom. The originals were already in a safe deposit box. I changed the passwords to my email, financial accounts, and mobile phone. I also checked my credit report. Nothing appeared unusual. For several days, Eric behaved as though the document had never existed. He cooked dinner. He asked about my book club. He brought me flowers from the grocery store. I almost convinced myself that the situation had been a misunderstanding. Then I received a call from a woman named Deborah Lane. She introduced herself as a senior living consultant. Your son asked me to contact you about available communities in the Richmond area, she said. My son did what? She paused. He said your family was beginning the transition process. What transition? From independent residence to a supported living environment. I told her there was no transition. I was not moving. I had not asked Eric to contact anyone. She apologized and ended the call. When Eric came home, I confronted him. He did not deny it. I was gathering information. Without speaking to me, you refuse every time I raise the subject. That should tell you something. It tells me you are afraid of change. It tells you I said no. He dropped his keys on the counter. You are alone in a house with stairs, old wiring, and too much maintenance. The wiring was updated 6 years ago. That is not the point. What is the point, Eric? He rubbed his forehead. The point is that we need a plan before there is a crisis. We have a plan. Melissa and Janet are my agents if I become unable to make decisions. You trust your sister more than me? This is not a competition. It feels like one. I told him that the living arrangement was no longer working. He needed to find another place. His expression changed from anger to hurt. After everything I have done? You have repaired a railing and bought groceries. I gave up my privacy to stay here. You asked to stay here because you had nowhere else to live. He looked at me as though I had betrayed him. You make me sound like a burden. I am asking you to move out. He said he needed 30 days. I agreed. That was my next mistake. During those 30 days, Eric became pleasant again. He stopped criticizing my decisions. He told me he had found an apartment. He began packing boxes. I felt relieved. I also felt guilty. He was my son. I wondered whether I had judged him too harshly. Then one evening, everything changed. Eric had gone to meet a friend. I was carrying clean towels upstairs when I noticed his bedroom door was open. A glass of water had spilled across the desk. It was dripping toward his laptop. I set down the towels, unplugged the computer, and moved several papers away from the water. I was not searching his room. I was trying to prevent damage. Then I saw my name. Patricia Ann Coleman. It appeared at the top of a typed statement. I read the first paragraph. Over the past 6 months, my mother has demonstrated increasing confusion, poor judgment, inability to manage household responsibilities, and resistance to necessary care. My hands went cold. Beneath the statement was a list of incidents. A fall in the garden. Driving during dangerous weather. Forgetting laundry. Repeated stories. Refusing financial assistance. Failing to maintain the yard. The list transformed ordinary moments into evidence of incapacity. Each event had a date. Each description was written as though Eric had been documenting a medical decline. I lifted the next paper. It was a preliminary petition requesting that Eric be appointed to manage my financial affairs if I were declared unable to do so. The form had not been filed, but much of it had been completed. The next document was a market analysis for my house. Estimated value, $540,000. Recommended improvements before listing: paint, flooring, landscaping, and kitchen updates. Another page contained handwritten calculations. House sale, $540,000. Estimated expenses, $40,000. Senior apartment deposit, $95,000. Remaining funds, $405,000. Below that, Eric had written, debt payoff. Investment property. Melissa objection. I read the words twice. My son had already divided the money from selling my house. He had allocated enough to place me somewhere else. Then he had treated the rest as available capital. The final paper hurt most. It was a draft letter addressed to Melissa. It said that my condition had deteriorated quickly and that urgent action was necessary. Eric claimed I had become suspicious, combative, and unable to recognize the extent of my limitations. He asked Melissa to support him voluntarily so the family could avoid an expensive legal dispute. I photographed every page. Then I returned them to the same order. I dried the desk. I placed the towels on the bed. And I left the room. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen until sunrise. Every sound in the house felt different. The refrigerator motor. The pipes. Eric's footsteps when he returned after midnight. He was sleeping under my roof while preparing to prove that the roof should no longer belong to me. At 8 the next morning, I called Janet. She asked me to come to her office immediately. Melissa joined us by video call. When I showed them the photographs, Melissa began crying. I knew he was being controlling, she said. I did not know it was this. Janet remained calm. She explained that the papers were preparations, not completed legal actions. Eric could not simply declare me incapable. A court would require evidence, evaluations, and due process. But she also warned me that false claims become dangerous when repeated to doctors, neighbors, relatives, and institutions. Has he contacted your physician? She asked. I did not know. Has he handled your mail? Sometimes. Does he have access to your identification or account numbers? Possibly. Does he know where your original documents are? No. Janet gave me a list of immediate actions. First, I would obtain an independent medical and cognitive evaluation. Second, we would notify my bank, investment company, doctor, and insurance provider that Eric had no authority to act for me. Third, I would review my existing power of attorney and strengthen it. Fourth, I would document my daily independence and gather witnesses who interacted with me regularly. Finally, Eric needed to leave my house. Not in 30 days. Immediately. I asked whether I could legally remove him. Because he had been living there for several months, the answer depended on his status and local rules. Janet did not want me to create a confrontation that could complicate the process. She prepared a written notice ending his permission to occupy the house. She also referred me to an attorney who handled residential possession matters. The process would be orderly. Not dramatic. Not instant. But it would be real. Before returning home, I visited my bank. I added a verbal password to my accounts. I confirmed that no changes had been made. I removed old account documents from the house. I rented a second safe deposit box. Then I met with my doctor. Eric had contacted the office twice. He had reported concerns about my memory and judgment. The notes were vague, but they existed. I explained the situation and requested a full evaluation. 2 weeks later, a specialist confirmed that I had no significant cognitive impairment. I had normal age-related lapses. Nothing more. The report stated clearly that I understood my assets, living situation, healthcare choices, and legal decisions. Janet added it to our file. While we prepared, I behaved normally around Eric. That was difficult. He ate at my table. He asked whether I wanted tea. He talked about apartments he claimed to be considering. Sometimes I looked at his face and remembered the child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Then I remembered the calculation on his desk. House sale. Senior apartment. Remaining funds. Debt payoff. My son had reduced my future to a subtraction problem. The first visible consequence came from Melissa. Eric called her and claimed I was behaving irrationally. He said I had become obsessed with privacy and money. He told her I might need an intervention. Melissa asked him one question. How much do you think Mom's house is worth? Eric became silent. Then he accused her of caring only about inheritance. Melissa replied, I am asking because you already had it appraised. He realized immediately that I had found the papers. That evening, he came home furious. He entered the kitchen holding his phone. You went through my desk. I moved papers away from spilled water. You photographed private documents. They were about me, my house, and my money. You had no right. You were preparing to ask for control over my life. I was preparing for an emergency. You contacted a senior living consultant. You need options. You obtained an estimated sale price for my house. That was general information. You calculated how much money would remain after moving me. His expression changed. For the first time, the anger faded. He understood exactly how much I had seen. Mom, let me explain. No. You are taking everything out of context. What context makes it acceptable? I am in financial trouble. There it was. Not care. Not safety. Money. Eric sat at the table and covered his face with both hands. He told me that his work had slowed more than he admitted. He owed almost $60,000 on credit cards and personal loans. Rachel had paid many of their shared expenses. After the relationship ended, he could not maintain his lifestyle. He had borrowed money to cover old debt. Then he borrowed again. He said moving into my house had given him time, but not enough. When I realized what this place was worth, I started thinking about what made sense for everyone. For everyone. You do not need a house this large. I need it more than you need the money. That is not fair. What is not fair? You have $500,000 sitting in these walls while I am drowning. I stared at him. I do not have $500,000 sitting in these walls. I have a home. You could live somewhere easier. I choose not to. You would still be comfortable. And you would be debt-free. He looked away. I finally understood why he had been monitoring every mistake. He needed me to become incapable enough to justify taking control, but capable enough to accept the smaller life he had selected for me. He had not started with a plan to hurt me. Perhaps he had even believed some of his concerns. But once he saw the value of the house, concern became opportunity.